our sponsors, Sarah and Shlomo Drazen, who are sponsoring this entire morning in loving memory of Sarah's father, Mr. Joe Polanski, Zichron Livracha, husband of our friend Roseanne Polanski, on the occasion of his yard site this coming Shabbat. We wish the entire Mishpacha Arichat Yamim and continued Nachama and Nachas from the many, many memories of Joe's lifetime. Okay.
Nice man.
Yeah, I'm sure because I was never zocheh to meet him, but I know his mishpacha, so I can imagine he was a very nice man. Baruch Hashem. Danny, do you want the source sheet? You have this? Yeah, I have it. All right. So tomorrow is a very, very unique situation in that it's the 10th of Tevet, and the 10th of Tevet, Asar B'Teves, is of course a day which we fast. It commemorates the siege of Yerushalayim, which led to the Chorban by Rishon on Tisha B'Av, and it's very interesting that Asar B'Tevet is the only fast other than Yom Kippur that if it were to fall on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos, that we actually fast. The fast is not moved. And of course, our Chachamim fixed the calendar that Asar B'Tevet cannot fall on Shabbos itself, but Asar B'Tevet does fall tomorrow on Friday, and it's the only fast where we fast on Erev Shabbos. And the question is why? And another interesting fact about Asar B'Tevet is that we always read Parshat Vayigash on the Shabbat preceding Asar B'Tevet. And the question is, what is the connection between, or possible connection, between the story of Yosef HaTzadik and Yosef revealing himself to his brothers and this whole experience of the fast of Asar B'Tevet. So that's the deep dive we're going to do together this morning. I want to begin first, though, with an interesting short two halachos in the Rambam that are not on your sheet. The Rambam in Hilchos Tanios says the following: Haroeh chol amra tzarich li tanot mimachar. One who has a bad dream, what's the halacha? Says the Rambam, you have to fast the next day. You wake up in the middle of the night and you remember you had a nightmare that you remember, and it's bothering you, it's haunting you. You have halacha is that you fast. Kedei sheyashuv v'yeor b'ma'asav yichapes b'han v'yachzor b'tshuva. In order that whatever difficult, or scary vision you experience as part of that nightmare, you'll do tshuva, and hopefully it won't come to fruition, that nightmare, okay? And one fast, even if that dream was when? Friday night. Okay, you fast the next day on Shabbos, even if that dream was Friday night. Okay, so that's the first halacha. The Rambam, in a few halachas prior to this, says, Ein gozrin ta'anit ala tzibor, lo b'shabbatot, v'lo b'yamin tovim. But when it comes to public fast days, the Rambam says that we didn't decree a fast day on the tzibor, in the community, not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov. So how do we explain this idea that one who has a bad dream has to fast even if it's on Shabbos, but we never established a community fast day on Shabbos? And I'll take it a step further, okay? The Asar B'Teves is a communal fast day. It's not an individual that woke up and had a bad dream. So what is it about the nature of fasting, of what's called a Tani Chalom, fasting on a bad dream, that requires us to fast, even if that bad dream was on Friday night, requires us to fast even on Shabbos, which is different than a public fast day where we're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. And I'll take it a step further. So if we're not allowed to fast on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos on a public fast day, with the exception being Asar B'Teves, is there or might there be a parallel to be drawn between Asar B'Tevet and this idea of fasting for a bad dream? Okay? We're going to come back to those questions. Now we're going to jump right into our sheets. Okay?
Is there also a connection between Asar B'Tevet and Yom Kippur?
No, because we're going to get there also. Very good. Okay? You've been listening to some of the shir this week, I think. Anyways, we're going to start with the Sedra, last week's Sedra.
Is this still relevant nowadays?
Yes.
No, I'm saying, is it relevant that if you have a bad dream, you're supposed to fast?
Yes.
I never heard it.
That's a halacha. There's a halacha that one should fast. Now, we're going to explore together why, and what that means, and why we fast. We're going to explore together. Okay. So first, let's start with last week's Sedra. We all know the great reveal. Yosef Hatzadik reveals himself to the brothers. And then Binyamin is brought before him. The famous passage that Yosef and Binyamin embrace and they begin to cry, weep on each other's shoulders and neck. And Rashi, the famous Rashi, text number 2 on our sheets, Binyamin Achiv Vayef. Why did Yosef cry when he embraced Binyamin? Al shnei mikdashot she'atidin liot bechelko shel Binyamin v'sofan licharev. That Yosef Atzadik at that moment had a prophetic vision. Why and what? As soon as he embraces Binyamin, he begins to cry because at that moment he has a prophetic vision that one day in the future, centuries in the future, in the Nachala that belongs to Binyamin's descendants, there are going to be two destructions. And what are those two destructions that he's prophesying? Chorban Bayit Rishon and Chorban Bayit Sheni. Okay, in the Chelik of the Nachla of Binyamin, Yerushalayim is part of the Nachla of Binyamin, and he prophesizes what? That they're going to be in the future two Korbanos. The Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed twice in the future. Okay, and Binyamin cries, why? Says Rashi, Al Mishkan Shiloh. Shatid liot bechelko shel Yosef v'sofo licharev. Okay, and why does Binyamin cry? Because he also has a prophecy. He realizes that what? That in the future, the Mishkan that once stood in Shiloh is going to be destroyed. Okay, and that was in the Nachla of the descendants of Yosef, and therefore they each cry. So the question that obviously be asked is, why does Rashi see this message of the two brothers crying, okay, of the two, in the story of Rachel's two sons being reunited? Why does Rashi see this specific message? Maybe they're just crying because they haven't seen each other. They've never really met each other. Okay, and what eternal message can we glean from this powerful moment in Jewish history? Now I have one other question. Is there any significance to our reading this story specifically on the Shabbos which precedes Asar B'Teves? And now we're going to begin to piece this all together. We're first going to hear from the first of our modern masters this morning, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzav Kosh Livracha, Schusa Yagin Aleinu. And Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal in his Likutei Sichos, which is his collection of the Sichot of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which many, many, many times and often begins with an analysis of Rashi. And so the Lubavitcher Rebbe is going to help us unpack this Rashi that we just learned together. And he says as follows: why did Yosef and Binyamin cry over the sanctuaries which were to be destroyed in each other's territory and not over the destruction that was to occur in their own territories? If they're having a prophetic vision at that moment, why doesn't Yosef cry about what? The fact that the Mishkan in Shiloh is going to be destroyed. And why doesn't Binyamin cry about the two Batei Mikdash? Why is it the opposite? So listen to this idea. Eliminating other people's problems ultimately depends on the other person's free will. Friends can help with their prayers and advice, but the person himself must take the necessary action. Okay? It's not up to us to solve someone else's problems. What? We can support them, we can help them, but ultimately that person has to persevere themselves and overcome whatever challenges they're having themselves. So when Yosef and Binyamin perceived that they were powerless to solve each other's problems, they cried in sympathy. Nevertheless, they did not cry over the future destruction of their own sanctuaries because they had the responsibility to find a solution to their own problems and not merely to sit and cry. Sympathy for each other's future losses. This empathy, this level of love for one another, of concern for one another, of concern for our brethren, so to speak, is a fundamental message, an eternal message, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe sees in this teaching from Rashi. Okay? And now we're going to come back to this and we're going to build on this even more and see exactly what this has to do with Asar B'Tevet. Okay, so the second modern master we're going to learn from today is Rabbi Baruch Simon Shlita. Rabbi Simon is one of the younger Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. and he has an incredible set of svarim on Chumash called Imre Baruch. That if you don't have this sefer, I recommend you try to get it. If you can, it's only available in Hebrew. It is an absolute go-to. It's gold. It's absolute gold, and it's a wonderful, wonderful sefer. So this is what Rabbi Simon has to introduce about Asar B'Teves and the connection between Asar B'Teves and the story of Yosef. Listen to his words. V'yesh tzaref lezem inyan adiyoma. He says we can add to this and connect this to the Inyana Diyoma, the timely messages of what we're discussing, meaning the fast of the 10th of Tevet. The Hine Ktava Beit Yosef, as we know, the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote, B'Shem Abudram, in the name of the Abudraham, Sha'asara B'Tevet Hi Mishoneh Mishar Taniyot, that Asara B'Tevet is different from all the other fasts. She'im hayachal b'Shabbat lo haya yuchalin lidchoto liyom acher. That if it would fall on Shabbos, we would not be able to push the fast another day. Marbo, because the pasuk in Yechezkel says, "Be'etzim hayom hazeh," those words that you fast. It was established to have a fast specifically on this specific day, Kamo b'Yom Kippur, which is similar to what the words that the Torah uses to describe the fast on Yom Kippur. Be'etzim hayom hazeh, right? U'misayem Beit Yosef. And the Beit Yosef concludes with the words, "V'lo yadati minayin lozeh," but I don't know why. He says, I know we're supposed to fast if it falls on Shabbos, and I know the Chachamim fixed the calendar so it can't fall on Shabbos, but I know we're supposed to fast if it falls on Erev Shabbos, but I don't really understand why. That's how the Beit Yosef ends, okay? Now the Chatam Sofer explains it. The Chatam Sofer, okay? And he writes to explain this idea. Listen to this powerful Chasam Sofer. That in the year that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, that decision, that gzeira, that din, that the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed, was already decided in Shemayim on what day? On the 10th of Tevet, before Tisha B'Av, meaning that same year, both times the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the decision in Shemayim that the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed that year at Tisha B'Av occurred when? On the day of Asar B'Tevet. V'chein, and therefore, says the Chatam Sofer, B'chol shana v'shana nigzar din b'Asar B'Tevet im yeh velut Tisha B'Av b'shana zu. Therefore, every single year it's decided, it's decreed on this day of Asar B'Tevet, whether Tisha B'Av will continue to be a day of Avelut mourning, or whether we'll see the Binyamin Beis Hamikdash on Tisha B'Av. V'yadua da'al Sarah Shavra, and we know that for a painful loss or a painful moment in the past, Kamo Yom Shemet Bo Avi V'Imo Ein Mitani B'Shabbat. Okay, there is a custom that in the Lithuanian world, okay, the Litvisha world, there's a custom to not to fast on a yard site. If you have a yard site for one of your parents, there's a custom to fast on the yard site amongst the Lithuanians. Okay, myself, I'm more, as anyone who's ever learned, I have a little more of a Hasidic natiyah, and I follow the minhag of the Hasidim, which is on a yard site. It's a hilula, it's a celebration. We drink a l'chaim. We say words of Torah and we recall that person fondly. But in the Lithuanian tradition, the yard site is a day of sadness, and therefore we fast on that day. But with the exception being that if the yard site falls on Shabbos, you don't fast. Okay. So says the Chatam Sofer, there is a precept that based on this idea of fasting on a yard site, that we fast to recall painful moments of the past. And that, if it falls on Shabbos, would not push aside Shabbos, meaning you wouldn't fast on Shabbos. Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast, okay? And even if you're fasting for a yard site, you would not be allowed to fast on Shabbos. Aval ta'anit chalom, mutar litanot. But when it comes to fasting for a bad dream, as we just learned from the Rambam, it's permissible to fast on Shabbos. The bishvil oneg. Why? Because there's oneg, this pleasure that comes, believe it or not, from fasting. Why? Sheyesh lo shemavatel tzara atida lavo alav lo meunehu. Okay, and therefore, why do we fast? Why do we fast when we have a bad dream? What's the whole precept, says the Chatam Sofer? That one is concerned, one is troubled, he's tormented by the vision that he had in that nightmare. Okay, it was not just a bad dream; it was a nightmare of a dream, and therefore it stayed with him when he woke up, and therefore he's concerned that what? That it might be some kind of premonition of something bad that's going to might befall him in the future, and therefore we fast. And since the whole reason why we fast is seemingly what? To alleviate that torment, that emotional torment, that maybe this nightmare might come true. Therefore, it's considered oneg. It's considered pleasurable to us. Why? Why? Because we're no longer holding on to that torment. If we fast and we believe that the fast will nullify whatever decree might be contained in that nightmare or revealed by that nightmare, then what are we doing? We're basically bringing pleasure to ourselves. We're letting go of that pain and that torment, that emotional concern. Hilkach tani tishabav. Okay, so now Hilkach tani tishabav. Dezel rak al tsara shavra lo dachi Shabbos. And therefore, he says, when it comes to the fast of the 9th of Av, what is the 9th of Av all about? Recalling the two painful moments in the past when each of the Batei Mikdash were destroyed. If that's the whole point of that fast, then it's what? It's fasting for a terrible decree, terrible events that happened in the past. And that's the only significance of this day of Tisha B'Av. And therefore what? It doesn't push aside Shabbos, meaning you wouldn't fast on Shabbos. Okay? Here's the source sheet, by the way. Good morning. It's okay. Good morning. So therefore, you wouldn't fast on Shabbos. But, says the Chatam Sofer, let's continue. Aval tani asar b'tevet, zeu al bitul tsar b'atida. But the fast of the 10th of Tevet, since it's about what? Hopefully changing the decree in Shemayim that we won't be mourning on Tisha B'Av, we'll be celebrating on Tisha B'Av. Therefore, it's what? Similar to a fast on a bad dream, that we're hopefully nullifying a bad decree and changing whatever premonition of a bad decree we might have had to something positive, and therefore the oneku. Therefore, it's pleasurable. Okay, hayadocha Shabbos, and therefore what? The fast would push aside Shabbos, and you would be allowed to fast, and we would on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos in the case of the 10th of Tevet. V'hainu shem mikevan shebasar b'Tevet danim lamala im yibana beis hamikdash b'shana zu, and that is now Rabbi Simon's summing this up. That is to say that since we learned from this Chatan Sofer that on this day of Asar b'Tevet, it's decided in Shemayim whether or not we're going to fast on Tisha B'Av. Harezet Tanit Atzar Atida Lavo. Therefore, it's considered what? A fast on a future painful moment, potentially future painful moment that we hopefully are going to nullify through that fast. V'zeh muter lehitanot. And therefore, it's permissible to fast. Kevan sheyesh la'oneg she'al yidei tanito ulai yuchal limnoa et atzar. Because we have some sense of oneg, fulfillment, pleasure, in knowing that hopefully through our fasting, we're going to prevent a future continued tsar. Okay? So, what the Chatam Sofer says here is that the fast of Asar B'Tevet is somehow halachically similar to the fast of a Tanit Chalom, a fast on a bad dream. Why do we fast when we have a bad dream, and why is it permissible to fast when we have a bad dream even on Shabbos? Because hopefully through fasting on Shabbos, we will nullify what? Any mitzvot of premonition that might come to fruition that was part of that nightmare. So too, therefore, it's the fast is hopefully nullifying future pain and transforming the potential for future pain to hopefully something not painful. So too, the fast of Asar B'Tevet, okay, which has the potential within it, says the Chatam Sofer, to change whether or not we'll be mourning on Tisha B'Av or whether we'll be celebrating Tisha B'Av. Therefore, there's a parallel to be drawn between these two types of fast. Okay, that's the Chatam Sofer. So what does this have to do? We'll come back. We'll take questions then. So what does it have to do with the story of Yosef HaTzadik? Okay, because we mentioned in the introduction that this fast always coincides with, follows immediately the parsha of Vayigash, and therefore it coincides either with Vayigash or Vayechi, right? So the conclusion of the Yosef saga, if you will, what does this all have to do with Yosef Hatzadik? So we're now going to learn from the Sefer Drasho Beit Yishai, okay, from Harav Shlomo Fisher Zecher Tzadik V'Kol Racha. It says on your sheet Shlita, he passed away about a year ago. This is a source sheet that I've used in the past. Okay, Rav Fisher Zatzal Schusa Yagin Aleinu was a great Rosh Yeshiva and Dayan here in Yerushalayim, and in his Sefer Drasha Beit Yishai, he offers a very, very unique insight regarding the connection of the story of Yosef Hatzadik to this day of Asar B'Tevet. And this is text number 5 in our sheets. B'Sefer Drasha Beit Yishai LaRav Agon Rav Shlomo Fisher Zatzal Katav. He writes, Sheroin Shebechol Taniyot Kemo Yud Zayin B'Tamuz B'Tisha B'Av Shayamu Rabbi Yom Zeh Ba'avar Yadav Hushrush Parani B'Yom Zeh. He says that in all the other fast days, throughout history, there was something that occurred that was going to be a premonition that there would eventually be a major tragedy that would fall out on those days. Okay, and he says, Yud Zayim B'Tammuz Hu Yom Chet HaEgel. Okay, Yud Zayim B'Tammuz. We don't fast in Yud Zayim B'Tammuz because it was the Yom Chet HaEgel, but Chet HaEgel occurred on Yud Zayim B'Tammuz, and that therefore was a premonition that this date was destined what? For something tragic to occur later in Jewish history. Tisha B'Av Hu Yom Chet HaMeraglim. Tisha B'Av was the day when the Meraglim came back and gave their bad report about Eretz Yisrael, their negative report about Eretz Yisrael. And therefore Tisha B'Av was also a foreshadowing of the later tragedies that would fall on Tisha B'Av. Amnam lo mevur ma'ira ba'avar basar b'tevet. He says, but what? But it's not clear what occurred earlier in history as a foreshadowing that this day of Asar B'Tevet would eventually be a day of tragedy for the Jewish people as well. Shal Yadav Hushrush Parani B'Yom Zeh. That through, as we just said, that through this earlier event, it would be a foreshadowing of other tragedies yet to come. Now listen to Vatzia Beit Yishai. Okay, Rav Shlomo Fisher suggests Sheyesh Lomar. There are those who say Kimichirat Yosef Ira B'Yom Zeh. Okay, Rav Shlomo Fisher suggested that there are those that have stated that perhaps this day of Asar B'Tevet commemorates what? The day that Yosef Hatzadik was sold by his brothers. Hine Mechirat Yosef lo poresh be'eza yom haya. Rav Shlomo Fisher writes, we know that it's not stipulated specifically in the Torah what day the sale of Yosef occurred. V'ilulei de mistafina amina, and therefore it's possible to suggest shahaya b'yom Asar B'Tevet, that it happened on the day of Asar B'Tevet. Va'afal pi she'ein raya l'davar zecher l'davar ke'echa. Okay, he says even though we don't have it specifically stated, he says we have an allusion to it. What's the allusion to it? Ki chodesh Tevet mazalo gedi. The mazel, the zodiacal sign of the month of Tevet is what? A gedi. What's a gedi? A kid, right? A goat. Ugedi misamel tchet mechirat Yosef. And the goat represents what? The chet of the sale of Yosef. Why? Shem HaKatuv, based on the pasuk, v'yishchatu se'irizim, that they shechted a lamb, a goat, a shefsela. U'kamoshe be'arnu at divrei HaGemara, as the Gemara explains, avon gedi shecharamti lo. Okay, in accordance with the gedi, okay, the sin of the gedi that I gathered. What's that referring to? How is the gedi connected to the story of Yosef Hatzadik? When the brothers stripped the coat off of Yosef, what do? They shech the goat and they dip the coat into the blood of the goat. And therefore, says Rav Shlomo Fisher, there is a remez, okay, in the zodiacal sign of this month of Tevet, that this is the month where Yosef Atzadik was sold, because the zodiacal sign is this Gedi, which connects back to the blood of the Gedi that the cloak of Yosef was dipped into. And therefore, he says, we can learn from all this and intuit from all this that perhaps the early difficult, terrible moment that occurred, there was a foreshadowing of the later tragedies that would befall the Jewish people on this day of the 10th of Tevet, was what? The sale of Yosef Hatzadik.
There's
Okay.
also a connection between the Shvatim and the Churban. The Asara Ruge Malchus, the Hadrianus mentioned, what punishment did you ever receive from the Chiras Yosef?
Right.
And that was he goes
Right,
to
right.
Asara Ruge Malchus.
It's very interesting. Anyways,
I missed that, say it again. Asaf,
yeah. Well, we're getting that's what comes.
It was mentioned by Hadrianus that what punishment did you ever receive for the sale of Yosef? And the Asara, the golden word, the answer said, you 10 will now atone for that sin. It's part of the
So Rabbi Simon in this next piece is going to start to bring this all together. All right? All right. Hare mevuar mizeh shebasar v'tevet nishrash bo sinat achim ayidei mechirat Yosef. Oh, what do we learn from all this? That the 10th of Tevet, what happened? What took root? It came to be fulfilled and carried out through the sinat chinam, the hatred that the brothers had for Yosef. They came to sell Yosef. And because of this, okay, transpired everything that transpired. And then, based on our many transgressions, what? Nothing has really changed, and we still haven't seen the Beis Hamikdash be rebuilt. Meaning what? Sadly, we're still not all in harmony. Sadly, we still don't love our brothers. Sadly, we still have a lot of resentment between us and our fellow Jew. And therefore, we have to really feel and pay attention and stress the words of the Gemara in the Yerushalmi, V'atanya nizkarim, and the famous words of the Baal Tanya, Shekulanu chativa achat, achi mamash. That the Jewish people collectively are one entity. We're really brothers. V'tzrichim anu lidoeg zelazeh. We have to feel what? To be concerned for one another. And if we are able to, then it will be decreed, please God, in the heavens during this year on Asar B'Teves, Sheibana Beis Hamikdash b'Meira, the Beit Hamikdash will be speedily rebuilt. V'tzavach Hamishi Yapach l'Sasen l'Simcha Amen. And the fast of this month of Asar B'Teves of Tisha B'Av, the fast of Tisha B'Av will be transformed to the day of Simcha. V'nira, says Rabbi Simon, ki tikuno shachet mechirat Yosef ya'idei avat Yisrael v'achdut. Oh, the fixing that has to happen for this the sin of mechiras Yosef is what? Avat Yisrael and unity. Ayidei shekol achad yavin shu v'chaviro hem shnei chalakim min neshama achat. That we come to recognize that really every single one of us and our fellow are two parts of one collective soul that we call Am Yisrael. And we're going to learn one last piece together from Rabbi Moshe Wolfson. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, of course, we learned from many times before. Rabbi Wolfson is Zecher Tzav Kodesh Livracha, was the longtime Mashgiach Ruchani at Yeshiva TORAH Vodaas in Brooklyn. He's also a little bit of a Hasidic Rebbe. He's your Rebbe? You're a TORAH Vodaasnik? Maybe you know my uncle who also learned TORAH Vodaas. My uncle also learned in TORAH Vodaas. Aaron Siviak?
Sure.
He's here now, actually.
three brothers.
Yeah, the three brothers. So Aaron learned TORAH Vodaas. Anyways, so Aaron's a Musbach TORAH Vodaas. Anyways, so Rabbi, okay, it's a brother. They all work together. We'll talk. Let's learn from Rabbi Wilson. Rabbi Wilson. We'll do Jewish geography afterwards. Rabbi Wilson is buried. No, Rabbi Moshe Wilson, it was for many years, decades, the Mashgiach Ruchani in Yeshiva TORAH Vodaas in Brooklyn. He also was the Rebbe of a community in Brooklyn known as Emunas Yisrael, which has there's a branch of that community here in Beitar Elite as well. And Rabbi Wilson was an absolute giant of Chassidut and Jewish thought. And they used to ask Rabbi Wilson, which Chassidus he belonged to, and his answer was, "I like to eat at all the Tishin." He takes a little bit from this Rebbe and from this Rebbe, so he's similar to to my affinity for Chassidut as well. And he's one of the great teachers of the last many decades of Jewish thought. So we're going to learn from Rabbi Wilson, who's going to bring this all together for us. Al kol panim miparshatenu yesh lanu l'tifei tanchumim l'chnisato l'zman shel asar b'tevet. He says, from everything we learn in our parsha, the little droplets of comfort that as we enter into this time of and prepare for asar b'tevet. Va'amin lo. Va'amin, and we have to believe lo yichush v'tyayesh chas v'shalom mizmanei achoshech la'galut. That a Jew doesn't feel pain or give up, God forbid, during the times of darkness and diaspora. And we should know that Hashem is always with us, even in our dispersion. I'm always with you. Okay, grab onto me with what? Grab onto my right hand. Everything comes from Hashem, and even now Hashem is revealing His wonders before our eyes. And therefore, during these time periods of where we might fall into despair, or we might think there's reason to despair, how do we strengthen ourselves? Through Torah and through davening and through acts of chesed and with every appropriate midah. And if we're able to do that, we'll be able to experience great riches and treasures. Okay, we feel like what? We're blind people wandering in the dark. We don't realize and recognize, or even can't even imagine, what comes as the result of our service to Hashem, of our doing the right thing. We don't even begin to understand how much we fix and clarify through our good deeds, through our maasim tovim. This is a very beautiful idea that Rabbi Wilson appears many times in Rabbi Wilson's teachings, and that is based on the Baal Shem Tov, that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated the Jewish people have been dispersed all over the world is that there are sparks of holiness that exist in the world, and that by our going to those far-off places, Rabbi Wilson even talks about this, about going on vacation, okay? That based on this Baal Shem Tov also, that when a Jew goes to Costa Rica and davens, okay, and eats kosher food and is Makadish Shem Shemayim there, that they're bringing back those sparks of holiness that have been dispersed all over the world. So he says that through our dispersion, okay, we have the capacity to inspire others. Even those that we don't know, Otam Klal, that we don't know them at all. And that we have the capacity, what? To bring others closer by just going there and clarifying and bringing the sparks of Kedusha back to life by our presence of going there and doing mitzvos in those places. Now, by the way, this is similar to a very beautiful teaching from the Sfat Emet that we shared, the Sas Emes, we shared here in the past, and that is that there's a mitzvah of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? Of loving your fellow as you love yourself. But if the Torah's definition of loving our fellow is love your fellow as we love ourselves, does the Torah define for us what it means to love ourselves? And the answer is no. So how do we know if we ever fulfill the mitzvah of loving our neighbor? Ask the Sfas Emes. That if the entire parameter of loving your neighbor is Yahavta l'reacha, love your neighbor, kamocha, as you love yourself, and the Torah doesn't give us the gedarim and doesn't define for us what it means to love ourselves, how do we know if we ever fulfill the mitzvah of loving our neighbor? So listen to the beautiful answer of the Sfas Emes. The Ger Rebbe. Ger Rebbe says we have to read that pasuk a little differently. He says we have to read that pasuk v'yahavta kama l'reacha kamocha. There is a mitzvah of v'yahavta. What's the mitzvah of v'yahavta? V'yahavta es Hashem, loving Hashem. He says v'yahavta kama l'reacha kamocha. The love of Hashem should be for your reach, for your neighbor, as it is for you. And the Sasemis goes on to explain as follows: that every single Jew who is in love with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, who fulfills the mitzvah, v'yahavta l'reacha, v'yahavta es Hashem l'okecha, every single one of us who fulfills that mitzvah, who is in love with Hashem, who lives a life of commitment, of avodas Hashem, of kiddush Hashem, of being on fire for being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says we become an example for others. Not by preaching and talking down to them, but by living a life of Kiddush Hashem, of Avodas Hashem and Kiddush Hashem. Others will come to see it and be inspired and come to love Hashem in the same way you do. V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, says the Sfas Emes. And therefore, back to Rabbi Wilson's beautiful words. Okay, when we find ourselves in Galus and dispersed, we may feel distant, but the reality is Hashem orchestrated this in order that the mitzvahs that we've done throughout the many centuries of that Galut has inspired many, many others and brought others closer to a life of Kedusha. And may it be Hashem's will that we merit to serve Him with a pure heart and soul and desire. And turn all of the fast days to days of celebration and joy. Our avodas Hashem, okay, even when we're within the darkness of Galut, says Rabbi Wilson, can be a source of transformation, not only for ourselves and for our fellow Jew, but for the entire world. And this day of Asar B'Tevet, that we fast on tomorrow, even though it falls on Erev Shabbos, okay, has the capacity to what? To change a decree, whether we'll continue to be in that state of pirut and galut, or whether we'll zocha finally to experience the ultimate achdut of Biat HaMashiach, of coming home, of seeing Binyamin Beis HaMikdash. And that's what this day of Asar B'Tevet is all about. It's to remind us, okay, that if we can come together as one, and we can live a life of Kiddush Hashem, Avat Hashem, Avat Yisrael, and Achdut, then we can transform the world. And that's why we fast, even if it falls on Erev Shabbos, because it's not commemorating just the painful moments of the past. It's what? It's reminding us that we can change the future. Bezrat Hashem, we be zocha to indeed change the future and to celebrate together with the Binyamin Beis HaMikdash this Tisha B'Av and no longer sitting on low floors. May we be zocha to learn from the experience of the sympathy that Yosef Tzaddik and Binyamin, his brother Binyamin, have for one another as they cry not for their own losses but for the losses of their brother. The sympathy, the empathy of what it means to live a life of Avas Hashem, Avas Yisrael, Avodas Hashem, and Kiddush Hashem.